Welcome back to The Rundown, and we're continuing with our coverage of today's serious security incident on the Israel-Lebanon border, with the Israel Defense Forces saying it foiled an attempted infiltration by a Hezbollah cell. And still with us is Reserves Colonel in the IDF, Dr. Eran Lerman. He's the former Deputy Director of Foreign Policy and International Affairs at the National Security Council and Vice President of the Jerusalem Institute for Strategic Studies. And Eran, let's try to put today's incident into a little bit of broader context, especially the series of events and incidents that do seem to indicate that perhaps we've reached a more escalated phase of the so-called shadow war between Israel and Iran, these series of explosions in Iran, and maybe what looks like a sort of stepped-up series of airstrikes by Israel in Syria.
Well, first of all, the Jerusalem Institute for Strategy and Security published a forecast in late 19 saying that 2020 may already be the year of action or the year of decision, because the Iranians are escalating their work on their nuclear program. They are also escalating their intervention and interference in regional affairs. This is not a concern for Israel alone. And I would suggest that the timing of the visit in Israel of the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff of the U.S. military, four-star General Milley, is not a coincidence. He came here in November at the time of escalating tensions. He's here again. This is very much a project on which Israel and the United States have closely cooperated before through previous administrations, including the Obama administration, certainly an issue on which we share perspectives with the Trump administration. The Iranian challenge is a challenge not only to Israel, but to regional stability, global stability, the counter-proliferation efforts of 2 or almost 3 generations now since the Cuban Missile Crisis, all can be brought into question if Iran succeeds in its break towards a bomb. So sometimes I wonder if we have a situation here with a TV series imitating reality, or reality imitating the ongoing Israeli TV series about Tehran and the Mossad activities. But clearly something is going on. I wouldn't dare speculate about specific events, but we are in a new phase, clearly, which is the result of Iranian escalation and Iranian acceleration of their program. Meanwhile, we have an ongoing campaign that was nicknamed the Campaign Between the Wars, or the Mabam by its Hebrew initials, by General Gadi Eisenkot, our former chief of staff, and has been ongoing and even escalating in the last couple of years, to deny Iran the capacity to use Syria as a land bridge to Lebanon and also as a base of operations against us. And this is very important, because if we do make up our minds that we need, or the Americans need to act against the Iranian nuclear capability, that whether or not Iran has the capacity to use Syria in this manner in an all-out confrontation could be a very important element in the overall equation. This is why the CBW, the Campaign Between the Wars, is so important. It is intimately linked to the overall strategy designed to foil the Iranian nuclear project. This is the core of what's going on.
Right, and by wars, of course, you mean the upcoming war would be one either with Hezbollah or with Iran and Hezbollah combined. I just want to remind viewers, we are expecting Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and Defense Minister and alternate Prime Minister Benny Gantz to speak. We saw the podium there. If I'm not mistaken, Eran, this is actually their first joint briefing since they made a unity government. Certainly on a security matter it is. What do you expect to hear from them, or what should they be saying publicly to both the Israeli public and I guess to the outside world this evening?
Well, first of all, I expect a very clear delineation of what happened and how Israel responded. The territory of lies that Hezbollah and Iran are using needs to be countered by the facts. But beyond that, I think they will be sending a deterrent message. Israel does not, I believe, does not have an interest at this point. I have heard arguments to the contrary. I think there are people in Israel who seriously consider this as a window of opportunity. And Hezbollah should be very wary of giving us such an opportunity. But at the end of the day, Israeli decision makers do not put the Israeli people at potential risk unless there's a very good, compelling reason to do so. So I think their message would be a powerful deterrent message aimed at three different audiences: the Iranians, at Hezbollah, and very specifically at Bashar al-Assad and his Russian supporters, who have no wish to see his regime put at risk in the service of Iranian interests. Now, the Russians have invested quite a lot in keeping that vile regime in place. The regime itself is a fact of life. We need to live with the fact that they won the war, but they would be putting themselves in a serious risk if they make the future of Syria subservient to Iranian interests. And I think the message, even if it is not overtly directed at Moscow and Damascus, this is the underlying, would be the underlying intent of such a deterrent message.
Right. Eran, now you said Israel is looking here for deterrence, not escalation, but you sort of alluded, I think, to a kind of theory that has been circulating among some security analysts, especially abroad, that perhaps Israel is looking to escalate the situation with Iran, to raise tensions, be it with Iran or through its proxy, Hezbollah, with sort of one eye onto the U.S. election in November, which may bring an administration back that is in favor of renewing the Iran nuclear deal, and perhaps also to that expiration of the arms embargo on Iran that expires in October. I mean, what's your reaction to that sort of theory that Israel actually could be looking to escalate the situation?
The escalation, or the set of things that have been the things that have been set in motion, all of this is a reflection of an Iranian decision to accelerate the military nuclear project once again. Whether this was triggered by Trump's disavowal of the JCPOA or would have happened anyway, maybe a couple of years later, is by now an irrelevant question. This is the trigger. This is the issue. The actions that seem to be taken, the damage done to the centrifuge production facility in Natanz, for example, clearly in response to Iranian actions, Iranian choices, and Iranian provocations. The same could be said for the elimination of Qasem Soleimani. The Americans did not look for an opportunity to do so. They were forced to do so after the American embassy in Baghdad came under a very serious and concrete threat. So I would put the blame squarely on the choices made by the Iranian leadership against the true interests of the Iranian people, against the needs of the Iranian people at this time, and this, I would argue, is the true sequence of events, and this is what sets the timetable, not the need to preempt what may happen after January 21.
Right. All right. Colonel in the Reserves, Dr. Eran Lerman, thank you for joining us on the Rundown.